Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into something that'll make you grateful for modern entertainment. Worker safety laws and the fact that your worst day at work doesn't involve being fed to lions for someone else's amusement. We're stepping into the blood-soaked sand of the Roman Colosseum, where death was the main event and survival was just an intermission between brutalities. So before we descend into the underground chambers where gladiators prepared to die, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into history's darker corners. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our community gather from around the world to explore the past together. Now dim the lights for that perfect sleep atmosphere, and let's walk through the gates of the Flavian amphitheater together. But fair warning, once we're inside, the only way out is through victory, death, or the mercy of a crowd that's paid good money to watch you suffer. And mercy, as you'll discover, is the rarest commodity in all of Rome. Congratulations, you're about to become entertainment for 50,000 screaming Romans who've gathered to watch you die in creative and painful ways. You've just been condemned to the arena. Maybe you're a slave who displeased your master, a criminal who stole bread to feed your starving family, or a prisoner of war from one of Rome's endless conquests. Your crime doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're standing in the hypogeum, the underground maze beneath the Colosseum floor, and you have perhaps an hour left to live. The hypogeum is a masterpiece of engineering, designed specifically to facilitate your death. It's a complex network of tunnels, chambers, and mechanical devices that can instantly transform the arena above into forests, lakes, mountains, or battlefields. But right now it's your holding cell, and it smells like fear, blood, and the collective waste of thousands of people who've stood exactly where you're standing, knowing they were about to die for someone else's entertainment. The walls are limestone and travertine, built to last for centuries and to muffle the sounds of whatever's happening above. But you can still hear it, the roar of the crowd, the clash of weapons, the screams of whoever went before you. The sound filters down through the wooden flooring above like a preview of your own final moments, a symphony of death that's been playing continuously for decades. You're not alone down here. Hundreds of other condemned souls are waiting their turn, packed into stone chambers like livestock awaiting slaughter. Some are praying to gods who've clearly abandoned them. Others are weeping, vomiting, or staring at nothing with the hollow eyes of people who've already accepted their fate. A few are trying to maintain their dignity, standing straight and silent, but you can see their hands shaking, their faces pale with the knowledge of what's coming. The gladiators, the professional fighters who might actually survive today, are kept in separate quarters with slightly better conditions. They're the stars of this show, the ones the crowd pays to see fight with skill and artistry. You're just filler content, human scenery designed to warm up the audience before the real entertainment begins. Your death is literally the opening act, the expendable prelude to the main event. The air is thick with incense meant to mask the smell of death, but it can't hide the metallic scent of blood that soaked into every stone over the decades. This place has seen more human suffering than any building in history, and it remembers. The very walls seem to whisper with the voices of everyone who's died here. Gladiators, criminals, Christians, wild animals, and countless others whose names were never recorded because their lives were never considered worth remembering. Above, the crowd is getting restless. They've paid good money for today's games, and they want their entertainment to begin. Some have brought picnic lunches to enjoy while watching people die. Others are placing bets on how long you'll last, whether you'll cry, and what manner of death awaits you. To them, you're not a person with hopes, dreams, and people who love you. You're a prop in their afternoon's amusement, as disposable as the napkins they'll use to wipe blood from their snacks. The arena floor above is covered with fresh sand, imported at great expense to absorb the blood that's about to be spilled. By the end of the day, that sand will be so saturated with human gore that it'll have to be completely replaced. The Romans have turned mass murder into a logistical challenge, and they're very good at logistics. They've calculated exactly how much sand is needed per death, how often it needs to be raked, and how quickly it can be changed between events. You can hear the mechanical systems grinding to life around you, pulleys, elevators, and trapdoors that will soon launch you into the arena like a human projectile. The Romans have engineered your death with the same precision they used to build roads and aqueducts. Your suffering isn't accidental. It's been carefully planned and choreographed for maximum entertainment value by people who've turned murder into a science. As you stand in this stone tomb waiting for your name to be called, you realize that everything you've ever done, everyone you've ever loved, and every dream you've ever had has led to this moment. You're about to become a footnote in Roman entertainment history, a brief distraction for people who view human life as disposable. Your mother, if she's still alive, will never know what happened to you. Your children, if you have any, will grow up without ever learning how their parent died. The worst part isn't that you're going to die, it's that your death will be meaningless. There's no honor here, no noble cause, no greater purpose. You're going to die because death is profitable, because cruelty is entertaining, and because the Roman Empire has built an entire industry around the systematic destruction of human beings for public amusement. Your death will teach Roman children that some lives don't matter, that violence is entertainment, and that power gives you the right to destroy other people for fun. But look on the bright side. At least your death will be memorable. After all, you're about to perform on the world's most famous stage, in front of the largest audience you'll ever have. Too bad you won't be alive to take a bow. The guards are approaching now, their keys jangling like funeral bells. Your time is up. Whatever you were before this moment, farmer, baker, merchant, mother, father, dreamer, you're about to become something else entirely. Entertainment. And in Rome, entertainment always ends the same way, with death. Before we watch you die in the arena, let's talk about how you got here. If you're lucky enough to be a trained gladiator rather than random criminal fodder, you've spent months or years in a gladiator school. A place that makes modern military boot camps look like luxury resorts. These schools exist for one purpose: to teach people how to kill each other in ways that entertain crowds while maximizing the drama and minimizing the chance of actual survival. The most famous gladiator school is the Ludus Magnus, connected to the Colosseum by an underground tunnel, so gladiators can be moved directly from training to death without escaping or being rescued. It's like a university for murder, with a curriculum designed around turning human beings into weapons that destroy each other for entertainment. The academic year here doesn't end with graduation, it ends with death. Your day starts at dawn with a breakfast of barley, beans, and ash. Yes, ash, because Romans believe it makes bones stronger. This diet is specifically designed to build muscle, while keeping you weak enough that you can't effectively rebel. You're fed like livestock being prepared for slaughter, because that's exactly what you are. The portions are calculated to provide just enough nutrition to make you look impressive in the arena, while ensuring you don't have the energy to fight your captors. Training begins with wooden weapons against practice posts. You'll spend hours learning sword techniques, shield work, and footwork. Not because anyone wants you to be good at fighting, but because skilled fighters put on better shows before they die. The crowd wants to see technique, drama, and artistry in your death. Dying quickly and efficiently doesn't sell tickets. The Romans have discovered that audiences will pay more to watch someone die well than to watch someone die quickly. Your trainers are former gladiators who survived long enough to retire, a rare achievement that speaks to either exceptional skill or exceptional luck. They teach you the different fighting styles: the Mamilla with his fish-shaped helmet and sword, the Retiarius with his net and trident, the Thraex with his curved sword and small shield. Each style is designed to create specific types of combat that the crowd finds entertaining, specific ways of dying that maximize spectacle and drama. But here's what your trainers don't tell you. The fights are often rigged. Promoters manipulate matchups to create the most dramatic possible outcomes. Popular gladiators are protected through careful opponent selection and equipment advantages. Unknown fighters are fed to the favorites like human sacrifices. Your training might make you a better fighter, but it won't make you less disposable. The house always wins, and the house profits from your death. The school is essentially a prison with workout equipment. You sleep in small stone cells, chained at night to prevent escape attempts. The food is adequate but monotonous. Enough to keep you alive and strong, but not enough to make life pleasant. Medical care is provided not because anyone cares about your well-being, but because injured gladiators can't perform. You're livestock, and livestock needs to be maintained in working condition until slaughter. Discipline is brutal and absolute. Disobedience is punished with flogging, branding, or being fed to wild animals. Escape attempts result in crucifixion, a slow, agonizing death designed to discourage others from trying. The school operates on the principle that you're already dead. You're just being kept alive until your death can be monetized. Every breath you take is borrowed time that belongs to your owners. Your fellow students aren't friends. They're future opponents who might kill you for the entertainment of strangers. Forming attachments is discouraged because emotional connections reduce the entertainment value of watching you fight to the death. The school systematically destroys human bonds to make murder easier for everyone involved. Trust becomes a liability when trusting the wrong person might mean dying at their hands while a crowd cheers. Women train here too. Female gladiators called gladiatrices who fight each other, or wild animals for the specific entertainment of watching women die violently. They face additional humiliation because their participation violates Roman gender expectations, making their deaths even more sensational for the crowd. Female gladiators are often portrayed as Amazons or mythological figures to add exotic appeal to their executions. The psychological conditioning is as important as the physical training. You're taught to view death as inevitable and honor as achievable only through spectacular combat. The school indoctrinates you into a culture where dying well is more important than living well, where courage is measured by your willingness to be butchered for someone else's amusement. You learn to find meaning in meaninglessness, honor in dishonor, dignity in degradation. Some gladiators develop Stockholm syndrome toward their captors, identifying with the system that's destroying them and taking pride in their ability to die entertainingly. This psychological manipulation makes them more compliant and reduces the need for physical force to maintain control. They begin to see their captors as father figures, their trainers as mentors, and their upcoming deaths as opportunities for glory rather than termination. The graduation ceremony from Gladiator school is your first fight in the arena. If you survive, you get to continue training until your next fight. If you die, you've fulfilled your purpose and your slot is given to someone else. Either way, the school has succeeded in its mission of turning you into a human entertainment product. Success is measured not by your survival, but by how much entertainment value you provide before dying. Religious instruction is also part of the curriculum. You're taught to pray to Mars, the god of war, and to view your death as a sacred offering that honors the gods and the empire. Your execution becomes a religious act rather than simple murder, providing spiritual justification for the entertainment industry that's consuming you. The gods supposedly demand blood sacrifice, and you're honored to provide it. Social hierarchy within the school mirrors Roman society, with successful gladiators receiving better treatment, while newcomers and failures are treated as expendable resources. This creates competition and prevents unity among the condemned, making rebellion less likely while encouraging performance that benefits the entertainment industry. By the time you're considered ready for the Colosseum, you've been systematically broken down and rebuilt as a weapon designed to self-destruct in public. You're physically stronger than when you arrived, but you're also psychologically shattered, socially isolated, and completely dependent on a system that views your death as profit. You've learned everything you need to know about fighting, except how to survive it. The school has taught you to die like a professional. Now all that remains is putting that education to use. But maybe you're not a gladiator at all. Maybe you've been condemned to something worse, being fed to wild animals in the arena during the morning warm-up shows. This form of execution, called damnatio ad bestias, is considered so entertaining that it's become a standard part of Roman justice. Your death will serve both as punishment for your crimes and as a light snack for the crowd before the main event. The Romans have turned animal attacks into an art form. They don't just throw you into a pit with hungry lions. That would be over too quickly and wouldn't provide enough entertainment value. Instead, they've developed elaborate staging, costuming, and choreography to maximize the drama and spectacle of watching you being torn apart by wild beasts. Your death is a production, and you're the unwilling star. You might be dressed as Orpheus and told to charm the animals with music. The crowd knows the myth. Orpheus could make any creature peaceful with his songs. They're betting on whether you can actually do it, or whether the lions will ignore your performance and eat you anyway. Spoiler alert, the lions are hungry. They've been deliberately starved for several days, and your musical abilities aren't going to save you. But the costume and the lyre make your death more thematically interesting for the audience. Or perhaps you're costumed as Prometheus, chained to a rock while an eagle eats your liver. In the myth, Prometheus is immortal and regenerates overnight, so his punishment can continue forever. You're not immortal, so your performance will be significantly shorter and significantly more final than the original story. But the mythological framework gives your death cultural significance that elevates it above simple execution. The animals used for these executions aren't chosen randomly. Roman beastmasters select creatures specifically for their entertainment value. Lions are popular because they're dramatic. They roar, they pounce, and they kill in ways that look spectacular from the arena seats. Bears are also crowd favorites because they can stand on their hind legs like humans, making the combat seem more like a fair fight, even though you have no weapons and no chance of survival. But the Romans aren't content with ordinary predators. They import exotic animals from across the empire. Elephants from Africa, tigers from Asia, crocodiles from Egypt, wolves from Germania, wild boars from Gaul. These creatures are deliberately starved before performances to make them more aggressive and more likely to attack immediately, rather than ignore the human sacrifices placed in front of them. Hunger makes them desperate, and desperate animals provide better entertainment. The logistics of animal execution are staggering. The Colosseum has an elaborate system of cages, elevators, and trapdoors that can instantly populate the arena floor, with dozens of hungry predators. Animals are lifted from underground chambers on platforms, emerging from trapdoors like deadly surprises. The crowd never knows what's coming next, which keeps them engaged and excited throughout your prolonged death. Your execution isn't just about being killed by animals. It's about being killed by animals in creative and visually interesting ways. You might be tied to a stake so you can't run away, forcing you to stand still while predators approach. Or you might be given weapons that look formidable, but are actually useless against the creatures you're facing. A wooden sword against a lion, a reed shield against a bear. Some condemned criminals are sewn into animal skins and then released into the arena with hunting dogs. The dogs are trained to attack anything that smells like prey, and you've been deliberately made to smell like the animals they're used to hunting. It's psychological torture followed by physical destruction, all packaged as entertainment for people eating lunch in the stands. The crowd enjoys both your terror and your death. The crowd participation aspect makes these executions particularly cruel. The audience shouts suggestions for how you should be killed, votes on which animals should be released next, and cheers when you're caught or mauled. Your suffering is interactive entertainment, where the crowd gets to help decide how you die. They're not passive observers. They're active participants in your destruction. Children attend these events as educational experiences. Roman parents bring their kids to watch people being eaten alive as lessons about the consequences of breaking Roman law. The message is clear: obey the empire or become tiger food. It's civics education through public torture, and the children learn early that some human lives are disposable entertainment. The animal handlers who manage these executions are skilled professionals who understand predator behavior and crowd psychology. They know how to time the releases for maximum dramatic effect, how to manipulate animal behavior to create the most entertaining kills, and how to stage multiple executions for variety and pacing. They're directors of death, choreographing your destruction for maximum audience impact. But sometimes the animals don't cooperate with the entertainment plan. Well-fed predators might ignore the human victims entirely, lounging in the sun instead of attacking. Crowd-shy animals might cower in corners rather than performing their role as executioners. When this happens, handlers use whips, fire, and spears to force the animals to attack, often injuring them to make them angry enough to kill. Even the animals are victims of this system. The cleanup after animal executions is a specialized job. The arena floor is covered with blood, torn clothing, scattered body parts, and traumatized animals who need to be recaptured and returned to their cages. Slaves with rakes and shovels work quickly to prepare the space for the next act, removing evidence of the previous deaths to maintain the illusion that this is entertainment rather than mass murder. Your death by animal attack isn't quick or clean like in the movies. Real predator kills are messy, prolonged, and agonizing. You'll likely be mauled, partially eaten while still alive, and left to bleed out in the sand while the crowd rates your performance. Lions don't aim for quick kills when they're not genuinely hunting for food. They play with their prey, which makes for better entertainment but worse death. The Romans have also developed variations on animal execution for special occasions. Mass executions might involve releasing dozens of predators simultaneously to chase hundreds of condemned criminals around the arena floor. Naval battles feature prisoners fighting each other, while crocodiles swim in the flooded arena, adding the threat of death by animal to the existing threat of death by combat. By the time the animals are finished with you, you've served your purpose in the Roman justice system. Your death has entertained thousands of people, reinforced social order through terror, and provided a practical solution to the problem of prison overcrowding. You're not a person anymore. You're just fertilizer for the arena sand, and the show must go on. If you've managed to avoid the animals and made it to an actual gladiator combat, congratulations. You've earned the right to die with a sword in your hand instead of claws in your back. But don't mistake this for mercy. Gladiatorial combat is murder choreographed as ballet, death packaged as sport, and your life treated as currency in Rome's entertainment economy. The matchups are carefully designed to create specific types of drama. You might be a heavily armored Murmillo facing a lightly equipped Retiarius with his net and trident. The crowd loves this pairing because it represents different fighting philosophies: strength versus speed, protection versus mobility, tradition versus innovation. What they don't mention is that one of these fighting styles has significant advantages over the other, and the promoters know exactly which one. The outcome isn't predetermined, but the odds certainly are. Before you enter the arena, you participate in the Pompa, a parade that's part religious ceremony, part fashion show, and part funeral procession. You march around the arena in elaborate costumes, displaying the weapons that will soon be used to kill you, while the crowd evaluates your appearance and places bets on your survival. It's like a livestock auction where the animals wave at their potential buyers. The weapons you carry aren't chosen for effectiveness. They're chosen for entertainment value. Some gladiators fight with tiny shields that provide minimal protection. Others use weapons so heavy they can barely lift them. The goal isn't to give you the best chance of survival. It's to create visually interesting ways for you to die. Gladiator with a massive shield might seem protected, but the shield is so heavy, it slows him down and makes him vulnerable to quick attacks. Your armor is similarly designed for spectacle rather than protection. It covers enough of your body to make you look formidable while leaving vital areas exposed for dramatic wounds. A gladiator's helmet might protect your head while leaving your entire torso vulnerable, ensuring that any serious injury will be visible to the crowd and painful for you to endure. The armor is costume, not protection. The arena floor itself is designed to enhance the violence. The sand absorbs blood, but also makes footing treacherous. You might slip on loose sand at a crucial moment, turning skilled combat into accidental suicide. The raised barriers around the arena prevent escape, but also create ricochets that can send weapons flying in unexpected directions, adding an element of random chance to your death. Once combat begins, you're performing for an audience that understands the technical aspects of what they're watching. Romans are connoisseurs of violence who can appreciate subtle differences in technique, timing, and tactics. They're not just watching you fight, they're critiquing your performance and comparing it to previous shows they've attended. Your death is being judged like a work of art. The crowd's reaction directly affects your chances of survival. If you put on an entertaining fight, They might demand mercy if you're defeated. If you disappoint them, by fighting defensively, showing fear, or failing to provide adequate spectacle, they'll demand your death regardless of your skill level. You're not just fighting your opponent, you're fighting for the approval of 50,000 people who view your life as expendable entertainment. Referee officials called sumarudis oversee the combat to ensure maximum entertainment value. They can stop fights to treat injuries, reset positions for better viewing angles, or force tired fighters to continue when they'd rather rest. Their job isn't to ensure fairness. It's to manage the pacing and drama of your potential death. They're directors, not referees. If you're seriously wounded, the fight doesn't stop. Gladiators are expected to continue fighting until they're physically incapable of holding weapons. The crowd wants to see courage under pressure, skill despite injury, and determination in the face of certain death. Giving up isn't an option. It's a ticket to immediate execution. You fight until you drop, literally. The famous thumbs up or down gesture for determining the fate of defeated gladiators is more complex than Hollywood portrays. The crowd's decision is influenced by how well you fought, how entertaining your performance was, and how much they've enjoyed the overall show. But ultimately, the emperor or presiding official makes the final decision, and their choice is often based on political considerations rather than your performance. If you receive missio, the grant of mercy, you get to live until your next fight. If you receive the death sentence, you're expected to die with dignity. This means kneeling, exposing your neck, and allowing your opponent to deliver a clean killing blow without resistance. Dying badly, by begging, running, or fighting the execution, is considered shameful and will be remembered as cowardice. The victor in gladiatorial combat doesn't celebrate like a modern athlete. They perform a ritual that acknowledges the gods, honors the defeated opponent, and demonstrates proper Roman values. Excessive celebration over your death would be considered poor sportsmanship and might turn the crowd against the winner in future matches. Even victory is scripted. Your body is dragged from the arena by slaves dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the dead, using hooks attached to your feet. This isn't just efficient body removal, it's theatrical staging that reminds the crowd of the mythological significance of what they've witnessed. Your death isn't just entertainment, it's a religious experience connecting the living with the underworld. Even in death, you serve the entertainment industry. Your blood is collected and sold as medicine to epileptics who believe drinking gladiator blood will cure their condition. Your organs might be harvested for various medical and magical purposes. Your body becomes a commodity, with multiple revenue streams extending beyond your death. If you somehow survive multiple combats and earn your freedom, you'll likely suffer from what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD, chronic pain from accumulated injuries, and social ostracism from people who view you as a curiosity rather than a person. Freedom from the arena doesn't mean freedom from its consequences. Many freed gladiators return to the arena voluntarily because they can't function in normal society. The psychological toll of gladiatorial combat affects even the winners. Killing people for entertainment, regardless of the justification, damages the human psyche in ways that Roman society doesn't understand or address. Successful gladiators often become alcoholics, develop violent personalities, or suffer mental breakdowns that make them unsuitable for life outside the arena. By the time your combat is finished, whether you're being dragged out by the heels or walking out on your own feet, you've participated in one of history's most sophisticated forms of mass entertainment, built around human suffering. You've been reduced to a performer in a show where the only meaningful performance is dying. Well, for the amusement of people who've never faced anything more dangerous than a dinner party. 50,000 Romans have gathered in the Colosseum today, and they're all here for one reason: to watch you die in the most entertaining way possible. This isn't a crowd, it's a mob, and understanding their psychology is crucial to understanding why your death is considered acceptable entertainment rather than murder. They've paid good money to see you suffer, and they expect value for their investment. The social composition of the Colosseum audience reflects the entire Roman hierarchy, from slaves standing in the upper tiers to senators seated in cushioned chairs near the arena floor. But regardless of their social status, they're united in their desire to see violence, suffering, and death performed for their amusement. Class divisions disappear when everyone agrees that human life is disposable. Entertainment. The crowd arrives early to secure good seats and begin the social rituals that make gladiatorial games as much about networking as entertainment. Business deals are negotiated while people place bets on your survival. Political alliances are formed while spectators debate the most entertaining ways for you to die. Your impending death serves as social lubricant for Roman society, facilitating connections between people who bond over shared bloodlust. Romans don't just watch gladiatorial games, they participate in them through constant commentary, criticism, and advice shouted at the combatants. The crowd considers itself expert in combat techniques, strategy, and the proper way to die with honor. They're not passive observers, they're active participants in your destruction, coaches in your death, directors of your final performance. The betting culture around gladiatorial games turns your life into gambling currency. Romans wager enormous sums on outcomes that depend on factors completely beyond your control. The condition of the arena sand, the quality of weapons provided, the mood of the referee, and the whims of the crowd itself. Your death might make some spectators rich, while impoverishing others who bet on your survival. Children attend gladiatorial games as educational experiences designed to teach them proper Roman values. Parents explain combat techniques, discuss the importance of courage in the face of death, and use your suffering as a lesson about the consequences of defying Roman authority. Your agony becomes part of childhood development for the next generation of Romans, ensuring that the cycle of violence continues. The crowd's reactions directly influence your fate through complex interactions with officials and emperors. Loud cheering for mercy might save your life if you've provided good entertainment. Booing and demands for death will override any fighting skill you've demonstrated. Your survival depends not on your abilities, but on the mood of people who view you as disposable entertainment and who can change their minds on a whim. Women in the audience are particularly enthusiastic spectators, often more bloodthirsty than men in their demands for violence and death. Roman women are excluded from most public activities, so gladiatorial games become one of the few socially acceptable venues for them to express aggression and participate in public spectacle. Your suffering provides entertainment for people who have few other outlets for their frustrations. The emperor's presence transforms gladiatorial games from entertainment into political theater. When the emperor attends, he's not just watching the games, he's performing for the crowd, demonstrating his power through control over life and death. Your fate becomes a prop in imperial propaganda, designed to remind everyone of the emperor's absolute authority over every Roman life. Crowd psychology during gladiatorial games follows predictable patterns that promoters manipulate for maximum effect. The audience starts excited but calm, becomes increasingly bloodthirsty as violence escalates, reaches peak frenzy during climactic moments, and experiences post-violence satisfaction that leaves them ready for the next spectacle. Your death is carefully timed to coincide with peak audience engagement, maximizing both emotional impact and entertainment value. The social bonding that occurs in Colosseum crowds creates shared experiences that strengthen Roman identity and cultural values. Watching you die together makes the audience feel connected to each other and to Roman civilization. Your suffering becomes a form of civic participation that reinforces social cohesion through shared cruelty. Romans leave the arena feeling more Roman, more connected to their empire, and more certain of their superiority over the people they've watched die. Religious elements in gladiatorial games give the crowd permission to enjoy human suffering by framing it as divine will or moral justice. The gods supposedly approve of the violence, the deaths serve religious purposes, and the spectacle connects the audience with divine power. Your execution becomes a sacred act rather than murder, absolving the crowd of moral responsibility for their entertainment choices. The crowd's expertise in violence comes from attending numerous gladiatorial games making them sophisticated consumers of human suffering who can appreciate technical skill, dramatic timing, and artistic elements in combat. They're not just watching random violence, they're evaluating professional performances by people trained specifically to die entertainingly. Your death is art criticism applied to murder. Post-game discussions among spectators focus on rating performances, comparing current games to previous experiences, and analyzing the technical aspects of what they've witnessed. Your death becomes conversation material for people who treat human suffering as a topic for casual social interaction. Romans debate your fighting technique the way modern sports fans debate athletic performance. The economic impact of crowd attendance creates powerful incentives to maintain and expand gladiatorial games. The audience spends money on tickets, food, beverages, souvenirs, and additional entertainment, generating revenue that supports the entire system. The crowd's purchasing power makes your death economically valuable to Roman society, ensuring that the games continue regardless of their human cost. Veterans in the audience often provide commentary based on their military experience, explaining combat techniques and tactical decisions to less knowledgeable spectators. Your fight becomes a teaching tool for people who understand violence professionally and can appreciate the technical aspects of watching you die. Former soldiers use your death to educate civilians about the realities of warfare. The crowd's emotional investment in gladiatorial games creates a form of addiction, where spectators require increasingly extreme violence to achieve the same level of satisfaction. What shocked and thrilled audiences initially becomes routine, demanding more creative deaths, more exotic animals, and more elaborate staging to maintain interest. Your death must be more spectacular than yesterday's deaths to satisfy an audience with growing appetites for violence. By the time the crowd leaves the Colosseum, they've experienced shared entertainment that reinforces their Roman identity, provides social bonding opportunities, and satisfies their appetite for violence without requiring them to personally participate in killing. Your death has served their psychological needs while allowing them to maintain the illusion that they're civilized people attending legitimate entertainment rather than accomplices to murder. The Colosseum isn't just an arena. It's the centerpiece of a massive entertainment industry built around the systematic destruction of human lives for profit. Your death isn't just spectacle, it's business, and business is very, very good. The Roman entertainment industry has annual revenues that dwarf most provincial economies, and every denarius is earned through human suffering. The economics of gladiatorial games are staggering. A single day's entertainment can cost more than a small city's annual budget. The money flows from wealthy sponsors, usually politicians seeking popularity or emperors maintaining control, down through a complex network of promoters, trainers, suppliers, and service providers who all profit from human misery. Your death supports entire industries. Gladiator prices vary based on skill, experience, and entertainment value. A fresh criminal condemned to die might cost almost nothing, just the expense of transportation and minimal training. A veteran gladiator with multiple victories and crowd appeal can sell for the price of a luxury villa. You're literally valued like real estate, with market prices that fluctuate based on supply, demand, and recent performance in the arena. The breeding programs for gladiators operate like livestock management. Successful fighters are encouraged to reproduce, not because anyone cares about their happiness, but because their children might inherit fighting ability and entertainment value. Gladiator families are investment portfolios where human beings are the assets and death is the return on investment. Betting on gladiatorial games involves enormous sums of money changing hands. Romans wager on everything. Who will win, how long fights will last, what type of wounds will be inflicted, whether mercy will be granted, which animals will kill, which prisoners. Your suffering directly generates revenue for gambling operations that have nothing to do with combat skill and everything to do with random chance and crowd psychology. The animal supply chain for beast hunts represents international trade on a massive scale. Exotic creatures are captured across the empire, transported in specialized ships, and maintained in expensive facilities until they're needed for executions. The cost of importing a single elephant from Africa can exceed the annual income of hundreds of Roman families, but the entertainment value justifies the expense, because crowds pay premium prices for exotic deaths. Professional gladiator schools operate as businesses with complex financial structures. They invest in training facilities, weapons, medical care, and housing for their human inventory. The return on investment comes from renting gladiators to promoters, selling successful fighters to wealthy buyers, and collecting fees for training services. It's human trafficking disguised as sports management, with profit margins that would make modern corporations envious. The construction and maintenance of the Colosseum itself employs thousands of workers: architects, engineers, stonecutters, metalworkers, artists, and laborers who build and maintain the machinery of death. Your execution helps support entire industries that exist solely to facilitate spectacular violence. The building trades depend on arenas, the weapons industry depends on gladiators, and the entertainment sector depends on your death. Concession sales during gladiatorial games are enormous profit centers. Food vendors, wine sellers, souvenir merchants, and prostitutes all benefit from the crowds that gather to watch people die. Your death is literally the backdrop for a massive commercial festival where thousands of people spend money while watching you suffer. The arena is surrounded by shops, restaurants, and services that exist solely to profit from death. The medical industry profits from gladiatorial games through multiple revenue streams. Doctors are paid to treat wounded fighters, keep dying gladiators alive long enough to provide entertainment, and harvest body parts from the dead for various medical and magical purposes. Your blood, organs, and bones all have market value that extends beyond your death. Even your corpse is a business opportunity. Slave labor at every level keeps costs manageable and profits high. Slaves build the arenas, maintain the facilities, transport the animals, clean up the blood, and dispose of the bodies. The entire system depends on unpaid labor by people who have no choice but to participate in their own exploitation. Slavery makes gladiatorial games economically viable by eliminating labor costs. Insurance and investment opportunities emerge around gladiatorial games. Wealthy Romans invest in gladiator schools, sponsor individual fighters, and participate in complex financial arrangements that spread risk and maximize returns. Your life becomes an asset in investment portfolios managed by people who view you as profit potential rather than a human being. The emperor uses gladiatorial games as economic stimulus, directing massive government spending toward entertainment that employs thousands of people and generates economic activity throughout the empire. Your death helps maintain political stability by providing jobs and economic opportunities that depend on continued violence. The entertainment industry becomes too big to fail. Regional economic development is driven by gladiatorial games as cities compete to host major events that bring tourism, commerce, and prestige. Local economies boom during game seasons as visitors spend money on lodging, food, transportation, and entertainment. Your suffering directly contributes to urban development and regional prosperity. Cities build their economies around death. The export of gladiatorial entertainment to other parts of the empire creates new markets and revenue opportunities. Roman cultural influence spreads through the promotion of violence as entertainment, creating demand for Roman-style arenas, Roman-trained gladiators, and Roman-supplied exotic animals in cities across the known world. Your death model is franchised throughout the empire. Retirement planning for successful gladiators involves complex financial arrangements since few survive long enough to earn freedom through combat victories. Those who do survive often invest their winnings in gladiator schools, training facilities, or other businesses related to the entertainment industry that nearly killed them. Even the survivors remain economically dependent on the system that destroyed their humanity. Tax revenue from gladiatorial games provides significant income for the imperial treasury. Ticket sales, vendor licenses, betting taxes, and import duties on exotic animals all contribute to government finances. Your death is literally funding the empire through entertainment taxes that make violence profitable for the state, as well as private entrepreneurs. Employment opportunities throughout the empire depend on continued gladiatorial games. From beast hunters in Africa, to weapons manufacturers in Gaul, to arena architects in Asia, thousands of jobs exist solely to support the systematic killing of human beings for entertainment. Entire communities depend economically on your death and the deaths of thousands like you. Banking and finance industries develop sophisticated instruments for investing in gladiatorial entertainment. Loans, partnerships, insurance policies, and investment funds all emerge to manage the enormous amounts of money involved in the business of death. Your life becomes collateral in financial instruments designed to maximize profit from human suffering. By the time you die in the arena, your death has generated revenue for dozens of businesses, supported hundreds of jobs, and contributed to economic activity that spans the entire Roman Empire. You're not just entertainment, you're a commodity in a sophisticated economic system that has learned to monetize human suffering on an industrial scale that won't be matched until the modern era. Your death in the Colosseum isn't just entertainment, it's a religious experience, carefully designed to connect the audience with divine power while providing spiritual justification for enjoying human suffering. The Romans have transformed murder into a sacred act that serves both the gods and the state, making your execution a form of worship rather than simple violence. The gladiatorial games begin with religious ceremonies that invoke divine protection for the spectacle and blessing for the violence about to unfold. Priests perform rituals, sacrifices are offered to the gods, and the entire event is framed as a religious festival rather than mass murder. Your death becomes part of a sacred calendar that honors deities who supposedly approve of human sacrifice disguised as entertainment. The mythological themes that frame many executions transform your death into a reenactment of divine stories that the audience knows by heart. When you're costumed as Icarus and thrown from a height to demonstrate the consequences of flying too close to the sun, your death serves both as entertainment and as a reminder of divine justice. The gods punish hubris, and your execution proves their power while teaching moral lessons to the crowd. Gladiatorial combat is presented as a form of devotion to Mars, the god of war, who appreciates skilled violence and courageous death. Your fighting serves the divine will while demonstrating Roman values of courage, honor, and acceptance of fate. The gods don't just permit your death, they demand it as proper worship that strengthens the empire through divine favor. The emperor's role in gladiatorial games connects him directly with divine authority, as he exercises godlike power over life and death while the crowd watches. When the emperor grants mercy or orders execution, he's demonstrating his divine mandate and his connection to the gods who rule through him. Your fate becomes proof of imperial divine authority that legitimizes political power through religious spectacle. Funeral games for important Romans include gladiatorial combat as a way of honoring the dead and ensuring their proper reception. In the afterlife, your death serves the spiritual needs of deceased Romans who require blood sacrifice to complete their journey to the underworld. You're dying not just for entertainment, but to fulfill religious obligations to the dead that ensure their continued protection of the living. The purification rituals that follow gladiatorial games cleanse the arena and the audience of any spiritual contamination from the violence they've witnessed and enjoyed. These ceremonies transform what could be seen as murder into sacred cleansing that removes sin and restores divine favor. Your death becomes part of a spiritual washing that makes the community holier rather than more corrupt. Votive offerings and religious dedications throughout the Colosseum remind everyone that the building itself is a temple to divine power expressed through human violence. The architecture includes shrines, altars, and religious imagery that frame your death as occurring in sacred space under divine supervision. You're dying in a temple, not just an arena. The gladiator's oath, the Sacramentum Gladiatorium, is a religious vow that transforms condemned criminals and slaves into sacred warriors who serve the gods through combat. By taking this oath, you become a religious figure whose death has spiritual significance rather than just entertainment value. Your execution serves divine purposes that transcend mere human amusement. Oracle traditions and divine signs are interpreted through gladiatorial games as the gods communicate their will through combat outcomes. If you die quickly, it might be interpreted as divine displeasure with your crimes. If you fight bravely, it could be seen as divine approval of your courage. Your death becomes a form of divine communication that helps Romans understand the will of the gods. The seasonal timing of major gladiatorial games aligns with religious festivals and agricultural cycles that connect human violence with natural rhythms and divine order. Your death occurs at moments when the gods are most active and most likely to appreciate blood sacrifice that honors their power and maintains cosmic balance. Religious prohibitions against certain types of violence are carefully structured to permit gladiatorial combat, while forbidding other forms of killing, creating theological distinctions that allow Romans to enjoy murder while maintaining their religious obligations. The gods approve of arena violence but condemn other forms of killing, making your death religiously acceptable, while other violence remains sinful. The afterlife beliefs connected to gladiatorial death promise spiritual rewards for those who die courageously in the arena, creating religious incentives for good performance during execution. If you die well, you might achieve a form of immortality through divine favor and eternal remembrance. Your death becomes a path to spiritual elevation rather than simple termination. Priestly interpretations of gladiatorial games emphasize their role in maintaining divine favor for the Roman Empire through proper worship and blood sacrifice. The gods protect Rome because Romans honor them through spectacular violence that demonstrates proper religious devotion. Your death helps maintain divine protection for the empire by satisfying divine appetites for human suffering. Divine justice themes frame many executions as demonstrations of divine punishment for crimes against the gods, the state, or natural order. Your death proves that the gods punish wrongdoing while rewarding those who serve divine will. The arena becomes a courtroom where divine justice is demonstrated through violent spectacle that teaches moral lessons to the audience. Sacred weapons and ritual equipment used in gladiatorial combat are blessed by priests and treated as religious artifacts, rather than simple tools. The sword that kills you has been consecrated to serve divine purposes, making your death a religious sacrifice rather than mere murder. Even the instruments of your destruction are holy. Prophetic elements in gladiatorial games allow priests and augurs to read divine will through the patterns of combat, the manner of death, and the reactions of animals and crowds. Your death provides raw material for religious interpretation that guides imperial policy and spiritual practice. The gods speak through your suffering. By the time your religious death is complete, you've served divine purposes that transcend your individual existence while providing spiritual justification for Roman violence. The gods have been honored. The audience has been spiritually elevated, and the empire has been strengthened through proper religious observance that transforms murder into worship. As the sun begins to set over Rome, your role in today's entertainment is nearly finished. Whether you've died spectacularly in combat, been devoured by exotic predators, or somehow survived against impossible odds, you've served your purpose in the vast machinery of Roman civilization. Your individual story, your hopes, fears, dreams, and humanity, ends here in the blood-soaked sand of the Colosseum, but the system that consumed you continues unchanged. If you died today, your body joins thousands of others who've perished in this arena for the amusement of people who will forget your name before they finish their evening meal. Slaves drag your corpse through the Porta Libitinensis, the gate of death, where it will be stripped of any valuable items, checked for signs of life, and disposed of in the most economical way possible. You're not a person anymore. You're waste material that needs processing. The crowd files out of the Colosseum discussing your performance like critics reviewing a play. Did you die well? Did you provide adequate entertainment? Were you brave or cowardly in your final moments? Your death becomes conversation material for Romans who treat human suffering as a topic for casual social interaction during their journey home. The emperor, if he attended today's games, returns to his palace having demonstrated his power and benevolence to his subjects. Your death was just one small element in his ongoing performance as divine ruler, who controls life and death with casual gestures. By tomorrow, he'll have forgotten you completely while planning the next spectacular demonstration of imperial authority. The gladiator schools receive reports on how their fighters performed, updating their investment portfolios based on who died and who survived. Your death or survival affects financial calculations for businesses that treat human beings as livestock with varying market values. The entertainment industry adjusts its inventory and plans future shows based on today's casualties. The vendors count their profits from crowds who spent money on food, wine, and souvenirs while watching people die. Your death helped generate revenue for countless businesses that depend on gladiatorial games for their economic survival. The blood money flows through Roman society, enriching everyone except the people who actually bled for it. The animals that participated in today's executions are returned to their cages if they survived, fed, and prepared for future performances. Those that died are butchered for meat that will be sold in Roman markets, ensuring that every part of today's violence generates economic value. Even the predators that killed condemned criminals become profit centers in the entertainment economy. The arena floor is cleaned, fresh sand is spread, and maintenance crews repair any damage from today's events. By tomorrow morning, the Colosseum will be ready for another day of spectacular death, with no visible traces of today's suffering. The machinery of murder resets itself for continuous operation. But if you somehow survived today's games, your situation isn't much better than if you had died. You're still a gladiator, still condemned to fight again, still likely to die in future games. Survival in the arena isn't victory. It's just a postponement of your inevitable death for the entertainment of strangers. The psychological trauma of surviving gladiatorial combat destroys your humanity as effectively as physical death destroys your body. You've learned to kill for entertainment, to view human life as disposable, and to find meaning only through violence that serves other people's pleasure. You're spiritually dead, even if you're physically alive. The Roman Empire continues its expansion, its conquest, and its systematic destruction of human dignity while presenting itself as the pinnacle of civilization. Your death or survival changes nothing about the fundamental nature of Roman society, which depends on the exploitation and destruction of human beings for the benefit of the powerful. The lessons Romans learned from gladiatorial games, that might makes right. That human life has no intrinsic value, that violence is entertaining, that power justifies any action, spread throughout the empire, and influence every aspect of Roman culture. Your death teaches children, shapes legal systems, and reinforces social structures that normalize brutality as entertainment. The gods, according to Roman religion, are pleased with today's offerings of human blood and look favorably upon an empire that honors them through spectacular violence. Your death has supposedly earned divine protection for Rome while demonstrating proper religious devotion through murder disguised as worship. The historical record will remember this day, if at all, as a footnote in the glorious history of Roman civilization. Your individual death will be forgotten completely, while the institution that killed you is celebrated as one of humanity's greatest architectural and organizational achievements. Future generations will marvel at Roman engineering, Roman law, Roman culture, and Roman achievements while minimizing or ignoring the human cost of Roman greatness. Your suffering will be rationalized as the necessary price of civilization. Your death dismissed as an inevitable consequence of living in primitive times. The truth that gets lost in historical celebration is that the Romans weren't forced to create an entertainment industry based on human suffering. They chose to build their civilization around systematic violence because it served their political, economic, and social needs. Your death wasn't inevitable. It was profitable. The infrastructure that supported gladiatorial games, the roads that brought audiences, the aqueducts that supplied water, the legal systems that condemned victims, the economic networks that funded spectacles, all continue serving other purposes within Roman civilization. The same systems that facilitated your death also support trade, governance, and cultural development throughout the empire. The gladiator trainers return to their schools to begin preparing the next generation of fighters for death. The animal handlers return to their cages to feed predators and plan future hunts. The arena workers return to their cleaning and maintenance duties. Everyone involved in your death returns to their normal lives, enriched by your suffering and ready to profit from the next victim. The families of those who died today, if they're still alive and free, will never know what happened to their loved ones. Roman entertainment doesn't include notification systems for relatives of the deceased. You disappear into the machinery of empire, unmourned and unremembered, except as a line item in accounting ledgers. The medical knowledge gained from studying your wounds and death will be used to make future gladiatorial games more entertaining and lethal. Roman doctors will add your case to their growing understanding of human anatomy, pain tolerance, and the precise methods needed to create spectacular deaths without ending them too quickly. The betting records from today's games become part of a vast database that helps future promoters set odds and manipulate outcomes. Your performance, whether successful or fatal, provides statistical data that will be used to engineer the deaths of countless future victims with greater precision and profitability. The crowd's reactions to your death are analyzed by imperial officials who use public response to gladiatorial games as a measure of social stability and political loyalty. Your suffering becomes a data point in ongoing assessments of Roman public opinion and imperial authority. By the time darkness falls over the Colosseum, another day of murder disguised as entertainment is complete. 50,000 Romans return to their homes, satisfied with their afternoon's amusement. The emperor has demonstrated his power. The economy has been stimulated, and the empire has been strengthened through shared enjoyment of violence. And tomorrow the gates will open again for fresh victims whose deaths will serve the same purposes that yours served today. The machinery of Roman civilization rolls forward, crushing human lives beneath its wheels, while presenting itself as the greatest achievement in human history. But your story doesn't end with your death in the arena. In many ways, it's just beginning. The gladiatorial games that consumed you become part of a cultural legacy that extends far beyond the fall of Rome, influencing human civilization in ways that echo through the centuries and into the modern world. Your death becomes immortal, not because anyone remembers your name, but because the systems that killed you become permanently embedded in human culture. The Colosseum where you died will host gladiatorial games for over 4 centuries, consuming hundreds of thousands of human lives in the service of entertainment. Each death serves the same purposes as yours: political control, economic stimulus, social bonding, and cultural conditioning that normalizes violence as acceptable entertainment. The gladiatorial tradition spreads throughout the Roman Empire, creating a network of amphitheaters from Britain to Syria, where local populations learn to enjoy watching human beings die for amusement. Your death model is exported across the known world, teaching conquered peoples that Roman values include the systematic destruction of human life for entertainment. The legal frameworks that condemned you to die in the arena become permanent features of Roman law that influence legal systems for centuries. The categories of people considered suitable for gladiatorial execution, slaves, criminals, prisoners of war, political dissidents, establish precedents for who can be legally killed for entertainment. The economic systems that profited from your death create permanent industries built around violence that survive long after the specific games that killed you. The infrastructure, expertise, and financial networks developed for gladiatorial entertainment find new applications in other forms of systematic violence throughout Roman history. The psychological conditioning that made your death acceptable. Entertainment shapes Roman attitudes toward violence, power, and human value that influence imperial policy, military conduct, and social relations throughout the empire. Generations of Romans raised on gladiatorial games develop cultural values that normalize brutality and celebrate domination. The religious justifications developed for gladiatorial games provide theological frameworks for other forms of institutional violence throughout Roman history. The spiritual arguments that made your death sacred entertainment are applied to military conquest, political persecution, and social oppression on scales far larger than individual arena deaths. The technological innovations created for gladiatorial entertainment find applications in military engineering, urban planning, and imperial administration that strengthen Roman power throughout the ancient world. The machinery that killed you contributes to imperial capabilities that shape the development of Western civilization. The political lessons learned from gladiatorial games inform imperial strategies for managing conquered populations, controlling social unrest, and maintaining political loyalty throughout the empire. The techniques used to make your death politically useful are applied to governance challenges across the Roman world. The social control methods perfected through gladiatorial entertainment become standard tools of imperial administration that influence how power operates in Roman society and its successor civilizations. The systems that made your death serve imperial purposes are institutionalized as permanent features of authoritarian government. The cultural values transmitted through gladiatorial games spread beyond the Roman Empire through trade, conquest, and cultural exchange, influencing attitudes toward violence and human value throughout the ancient Mediterranean and European worlds. Your death contributes to cultural changes that affect human development far beyond Roman borders. The artistic and architectural traditions developed for gladiatorial entertainment influence aesthetic values, public architecture, and urban design throughout the Roman world and beyond. The buildings where people like you died become models for public spaces throughout Western civilization. The medical knowledge gained from gladiatorial deaths advances understanding of human anatomy, physiology, and surgical techniques that benefit Roman medicine, while also improving the efficiency of future violence. The study of your wounds contributes to medical progress that serves both healing and killing. The engineering expertise developed for gladiatorial entertainment enhances Roman capabilities in construction, hydraulics, and mechanical engineering that support imperial expansion and urban development. The systems that facilitated your death contribute to imperial infrastructure that shapes the ancient world. The logistical knowledge gained from managing gladiatorial games improves Roman capabilities in military planning, urban administration, and large-scale project management that strengthen imperial power throughout the ancient world. The skills developed for orchestrating your death serve imperial purposes far beyond entertainment. The crowd control techniques perfected in amphitheaters become standard methods for managing large populations in cities, military camps, and public gatherings throughout the empire. The systems used to direct audience attention toward your death are applied to social management on imperial scales. The propaganda techniques developed for gladiatorial entertainment become permanent features of imperial communication that influence how power presents itself to subject populations. The methods used to make your death serve political messaging are institutionalized as standard government practices. The economic models created for gladiatorial entertainment establish principles for monetizing violence that influence imperial fiscal policy, military contracting, and resource extraction. Throughout the Roman world, the systems that made your death profitable are applied to exploitation on continental scales. But perhaps most importantly, the normalization of systematic violence achieved through gladiatorial games shapes Roman civilization in ways that influence Western culture for millennia. The values that made your death acceptable entertainment become embedded in legal traditions, political institutions, and cultural assumptions that survive the fall of Rome and continue influencing human society into the modern era. The Roman model of using entertainment to justify violence, the legal frameworks that determine which lives are disposable, the economic systems that profit from systematic suffering, and the cultural values that celebrate domination all become part of Western civilization's foundational legacy. Your death contributes to patterns of institutional violence that echo through history, in forms ranging from medieval executions to colonial exploitation to modern mass entertainment. By the time the Roman Empire finally falls, the gladiatorial games that consumed you have trained an entire civilization to view systematic violence as normal, entertainment as justification for suffering, and human life as expendable when it serves the needs of power. These lessons, learned through watching people like you die for amusement, become permanent features of Western culture that influence human behavior long after the last gladiator has been forgotten. Your individual death, meaningless as it felt in your final moments, becomes part of a historical legacy that shapes human civilization for thousands of years. The Romans who watched you die passed on to their children, and their children's children, the cultural values that made your suffering acceptable entertainment. Those values, refined and adapted but never entirely abandoned, continue influencing how societies think about violence, power, and human worth. As we reach the end of our journey through the blood-soaked sand of the Colosseum, it's worth reflecting on what your experience teaches us about the nature of civilization, progress, and human dignity. Your death in the arena wasn't an aberration or a primitive mistake. It was the logical conclusion of sophisticated thinking about power, entertainment, and human value that produced one of history's most successful civilizations. The Romans who built the system that killed you weren't monsters or savages. They were intelligent, cultured, technologically advanced people who created legal systems, architectural marvels, and organizational innovations that we still admire today. They wrote poetry, studied philosophy, and developed scientific knowledge. They were by any measure civilized people who happened to believe that some humans existed solely for the entertainment of others. This should be deeply troubling to anyone who believes in human progress or moral development. The Romans had access to philosophical traditions that emphasized human dignity, religious teachings that promoted compassion, and practical experience that demonstrated the humanity of their victims. They chose to ignore all of this in favor of a system that treated human suffering as profitable entertainment. The gladiatorial games weren't imposed on unwilling Romans by tyrants or foreign conquerors. They were popular entertainment that people demanded, supported, and celebrated. The crowds that cheered for your death weren't forced to attend, they paid to be there. The system that killed you had popular support because it served the psychological, social, and economic needs of Roman society. This popularity should make us question comfortable assumptions about human nature and moral progress. The capacity for systematic cruelty isn't limited to obviously evil societies or clearly immoral individuals. It exists within civilizations that consider themselves enlightened and among people who consider themselves good. The same human impulses that make us capable of great art, scientific discovery, and social cooperation also make us capable of institutionalizing brutality when it serves our purposes. The technological and organizational sophistication of gladiatorial games should also give us pause. The Romans applied their best engineering, their most advanced medicine, their most sophisticated logistics, and their most creative arts to the problem of killing people entertainingly. Civilization's greatest achievement served the cause of systematic violence, and that violence made possible many of those achievements. This relationship between progress and brutality isn't unique to Rome. Throughout history, technological advancement, economic development, and cultural sophistication have been closely linked with new and more efficient forms of human exploitation. The same innovations that improve life for some people often make life worse for others, and the same civilizational achievements that we celebrate often depend on suffering we prefer to ignore. The economic logic of gladiatorial games, the way they created jobs, stimulated commerce, and generated wealth, should remind us that systematic violence often persists because it's profitable rather than because people are evil. When entire industries depend on human suffering, when political systems depend on violence for legitimacy, when social structures depend on exploitation for stability, then changing those systems requires more than good intentions or moral arguments. The political utility of gladiatorial games, the way they maintained social control, demonstrated imperial power, and channeled popular frustrations, should make us skeptical of any society's claims to justice or freedom. Power structures that depend on systematic violence for their maintenance will always find ways to justify that violence, whether through legal frameworks, religious teachings, or cultural traditions. The cultural normalization of gladiatorial violence, the way Romans learned to see human suffering as acceptable entertainment, should make us examine our own entertainment choices and cultural values. The process by which ordinary people learn to enjoy watching others suffer hasn't disappeared. It has simply found new forms and new justifications. The religious sanctification of gladiatorial games, the way spiritual authorities provided divine approval for systematic murder, should make us wary of any religious or moral system that claims to justify violence for higher purposes. Throughout history, the most sophisticated arguments for brutality have come from people who claim to serve God, truth, or justice. The international influence of gladiatorial culture, the way Roman entertainment values spread throughout the ancient world, should remind us that cultural imperialism often involves the export of violence along with other civilizational achievements. When powerful societies spread their values, they often spread their capacity for systematic cruelty, as well as their capacity for creativity and progress. The historical legacy of gladiatorial games, the way they influenced legal systems, political structures, and cultural values for centuries after Rome fell, should make us consider how our own choices about violence and entertainment might influence future generations. The systems we create, the values we promote, and the entertainment we enjoy become part of historical legacy that shapes human development long after we're gone. The archaeological persistence of amphitheaters, the way these structures survive, as monuments to systematic violence, should remind us that our choices about how to treat other human beings create permanent records that future civilizations will judge. The buildings we construct, the institutions we create, and the societies we build become evidence of our moral choices that outlasts our justifications for making them. Your individual death in the Colosseum was both meaningless and profoundly significant. It was meaningless because you were just one person among hundreds of thousands who died for Roman entertainment, forgotten as soon as your body was dragged from the arena. But it was significant because it was part of a system that demonstrated humanity's capacity for institutionalizing cruelty while maintaining the illusion of civilization and progress. The Romans believed they were creating eternal glory through their achievements in law, engineering, military conquest, and cultural development. They succeeded in creating monuments that last for millennia and influencing human development for thousands of years. But they also created a legacy of systematic violence that continues to influence how humans think about power, entertainment, and the value of individual lives. Perhaps the most important lesson from your death in the Colosseum is that civilization is not the same thing as moral progress. Humans can develop sophisticated technologies, create beautiful art, build impressive institutions, and establish complex legal systems while simultaneously engaging in systematic brutality that would shock their ancestors. Technical advancement doesn't necessarily lead to moral advancement, and cultural sophistication doesn't necessarily prevent moral regression. The challenge for any civilization is to maintain the benefits of social cooperation, technological development, and cultural achievement, while resisting the temptation to build those benefits on foundations of systematic violence. This requires constant vigilance, continuous moral reflection, and willingness to question comfortable assumptions about progress and human nature. As you rest now in whatever afterlife awaits gladiators, perhaps you can find some comfort in knowing that your suffering wasn't entirely meaningless. Your death, and the deaths of countless others like you, eventually became part of historical memory that teaches future generations about the costs of civilization and the importance of human dignity. The arena where you died now stands as a monument not to Roman glory, but to the victims of Roman entertainment. The crowds that once cheered for your death are gone, but the questions raised by your suffering remain. How do we build societies that achieve greatness without sacrificing human dignity? How do we enjoy entertainment without exploiting human suffering? How do we exercise power without dehumanizing those subject to that power? How do we maintain civilization without institutionalizing cruelty? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking. The alternative is to repeat the mistakes of Rome, to build impressive civilizations on foundations of systematic violence, while convincing ourselves that our brutality is somehow different, necessary, or justified by the greatness it makes possible. Sleep well, gladiator. Your fight is over, but the struggle for human dignity continues. And perhaps in some small way, your suffering contributes to that larger struggle by reminding us of what we're fighting for and what we're fighting against. The arena is empty now, but the lessons it teaches are eternal. And those lessons begin with remembering that every victim of systematic violence was once a person like you, with hopes, fears, dreams, and the fundamental human dignity that no civilization has the right to destroy for entertainment, profit, or glory. Arrest now. Your story is told, your sacrifice is remembered, and your humanity is honored. The empire that killed you is gone, but the human spirit you represented endures. And that, perhaps, is the only victory that truly matters. But before we close this journey through the corridors of death, we must acknowledge that your voice was not the only one silenced in the Roman arena. For every gladiator whose name history remembers, thousands more died anonymously. Their stories lost to time, but their suffering no less real, their humanity no less valuable. The Colosseum consumed not just individual lives, but entire communities of the forgotten. Consider the children born in gladiator schools, raised from infancy to know nothing but violence and death. These children never had the chance to dream of different lives, never experienced childhood innocence, never knew a world where human worth wasn't measured by entertainment value. They grew up in facilities designed to produce killers, surrounded by the constant presence of death, trained from their earliest moments to view human life as disposable. Think about the families torn apart by the gladiatorial system. Fathers, sold into slavery and condemned to die in the arena, leaving behind wives and children who would never know what happened to them. Mothers who bore children only to watch them taken away for training. Siblings separated and forced to forget each other existed. The arena didn't just kill individuals, it destroyed the fundamental human bonds that make life meaningful. Remember the foreign prisoners of war, captured in Rome's endless campaigns of conquest, who found themselves thrust into an alien culture where their deaths were considered entertainment. These were soldiers who had fought bravely for their homelands, civilians who had committed no crime beyond living in territories Rome wanted to control, people who spoke different languages and worshipped different gods, but shared the same capacity for suffering as any Roman. Consider the political prisoners condemned to the arena not for genuine crimes, but for opposing imperial policies or expressing unpopular opinions. These were often educated, thoughtful people whose only offense was believing in different forms of government or refusing to participate in imperial cult worship. Their deaths served as warnings to anyone who might question Roman authority or suggest alternative ways of organizing society. Think about the religious minorities who died in the arena for refusing to abandon their beliefs. Christians, Jews, and followers of other faiths who chose death rather than betraying their spiritual convictions. These people faced a choice between spiritual integrity and physical survival, and they chose principles over preservation, becoming martyrs to ideals that transcended Roman entertainment. Remember the enslaved peoples from across the empire: Gauls, Germans, Britons, Africans, Greeks, Egyptians, each representing rich cultural traditions that Rome was systematically destroying. When these people died in the arena, they took with them languages, customs, stories, and ways of understanding the world that would never be recovered. The Colosseum became a graveyard, not just for individuals, but for entire cultures. Consider the women who fought as gladiatrices, facing the double burden of mortal combat and social shame. Roman society considered female participation in gladiatorial games scandalous, making these women objects of both fascination and revulsion. They died not only from physical wounds, but from social death, cut off from normal family life and community acceptance. Think about the elderly and disabled people who were condemned to the arena. viewed as expendable because they couldn't contribute economically to Roman society. These executions revealed the empire's utilitarian view of human worth, that people had value only insofar as they served imperial purposes. Age, illness, and disability became death sentences in a society that prized only strength and productivity. Remember the desperate volunteers who entered gladiatorial schools, thinking they could earn glory and freedom through combat. Many of these were free citizens, driven by poverty, debt, or romantic notions about warrior honor. They discovered, too, late that the gladiatorial system was designed to consume them, regardless of their skill or courage. Their voluntary participation made their deaths even more tragic because they chose their own destruction. Consider the professional gladiators who survived multiple combats, only to face the psychological destruction that came with repeated killing. These fighters often developed what we would now recognize as severe post-traumatic stress, becoming hollow shells of their former selves, addicted to violence or numbed to all human emotion. Their survival became a form of living death that was perhaps worse than quick execution in the arena. Think about the animal handlers, trainers, and beast fighters who worked with the exotic creatures imported for arena spectacles. These people faced constant danger from predators that had been deliberately made aggressive through starvation and abuse. They lived in the shadows of the entertainment industry, essential to its operation, but receiving none of its glory or financial rewards. Remember the countless slaves who built the Colosseum itself, many of whom died during construction from accidents, exhaustion, or unsafe working conditions. These workers literally built their own monument to human expendability, creating the structure that would consume thousands of their fellow human beings for centuries to come. Consider the medical personnel who worked in gladiatorial schools and arenas, torn between their healing mission and their role in maintaining a system designed to destroy human life. These doctors and surgeons had to develop techniques for prolonging suffering rather than ending it, for keeping fighters alive long enough to provide entertainment rather than helping them recover and live normal lives. Think about the guards, trainers, and administrators who worked within the gladiatorial system, gradually becoming desensitized to human suffering through daily exposure to institutional violence. These people weren't born cruel, but the system they served slowly corrupted their moral sensibilities until they could participate in mass murder without feeling guilt or revulsion. Remember the audiences themselves, particularly the children who attended gladiatorial games as part of their education in Roman values. These young people learned to associate entertainment with human suffering, to view violence as normal and acceptable, to dehumanize anyone who belonged to groups considered suitable for arena execution. The gladiatorial system didn't just kill its direct victims, it poisoned the moral development of entire generations. Consider the economic workers whose livelihoods depended on the gladiatorial industry, the merchants who sold food and souvenirs, the craftsmen who made weapons and armor, the transporters who moved animals and equipment. These people became financially invested in continued violence, creating economic incentives to maintain and expand a system built on human suffering. Think about the artistic and intellectual communities that celebrated gladiatorial culture through poetry, sculpture, painting, and literature. These creative works helped normalize and romanticize arena violence, making systematic murder appear heroic and aesthetically pleasing. Art became propaganda for brutality, helping to maintain cultural support for institutional cruelty. Remember all the voices that were silenced, all the stories that were never told, all the potential that was destroyed in service of Roman entertainment. Each death in the arena represented not just the end of one life, but the elimination of all the contributions that person might have made to human knowledge, creativity, and progress. The gladiatorial system created a vast silence where millions of human voices should have been. These forgotten people had dreams, talents, relationships, and experiences that enriched the world while they lived and impoverished it through their deaths. They were scientists who never discovered, artists who never created, parents who never raised children, teachers who never shared knowledge, lovers who never expressed devotion. By the time we account for all the forgotten voices silenced by the Roman arena, we begin to understand the true scope of what was lost. The gladiatorial games didn't just provide entertainment, they systematically eliminated human potential on a scale that defies comprehension. Every cheer from the crowd celebrated not just a death, but the destruction of everything that person might have contributed to human civilization. These forgotten voices remind us that the cost of systematic violence extends far beyond its immediate victims. When societies institutionalize cruelty, they create cultures of silence, where vast numbers of people disappear without trace, their contributions to human knowledge and creativity lost forever. The arena became a black hole that consumed not just lives, but possibilities. Not just individuals, but entire futures that might have been. As we remember your death in the Colosseum, we must also remember all those who died with you, whose names we'll never know, but whose humanity was just as real, whose suffering was just as meaningful, whose potential was just as valuable. They speak to us now through their silence, reminding us of what we lose when we allow systematic violence to flourish in any form. Their voices, though silenced, still have something to teach us about the preciousness of human life, the importance of protecting the vulnerable, and the responsibility we all bear to prevent the emergence of systems that treat any human being as expendable entertainment. In remembering them, we honor not just their memory, but our commitment to ensuring that such systematic destruction of human potential never happens again. So, how was your day in the Roman Colosseum? You've been systematically broken down, trained to die entertainingly, and either executed spectacularly or temporarily reprieved for future violence. You've experienced the reality behind the Hollywood glamour of gladiatorial combat, that it was murder designed as entertainment, trauma packaged as sport, and human suffering transformed into profitable spectacle. Still think you'd like to experience the glory of ancient Rome? The truth about gladiatorial games reveals something profoundly disturbing about human nature and civilization itself. The Romans weren't uniquely evil monsters. They were responding to universal human impulses toward violence, dominance, and entertainment in ways that their society not only permitted, but celebrated and institutionalized. They created sophisticated cultural, economic, political, and religious systems around the systematic destruction of human beings because it served their needs as an imperial power. Rome's greatness wasn't achieved despite its cruelty. It was achieved through its cruelty. The same organizational skills that built roads and aqueducts also built efficient systems for mass murder. The same legal minds that created lasting jurisprudence also created legal categories that made some humans disposable for entertainment. The same economic innovation that powered trade throughout the empire also monetized human suffering on an industrial scale. The Colosseum represents the pinnacle of Roman achievement and the nadir of Roman morality existing in the same structure. It's simultaneously one of history's greatest architectural marvels and one of history's most sophisticated killing machines. The engineering that we admire today was designed specifically to facilitate spectacular death for mass entertainment. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of gladiatorial games isn't what they reveal about ancient Romans. It's what they reveal about the human capacity to normalize, justify, and even celebrate systematic violence when it serves social purposes. The crowds that cheered for your death weren't monsters. They were ordinary people who had learned to find entertainment in suffering because their culture taught them that such entertainment was normal, acceptable, and even virtuous. The economic systems that profited from gladiatorial games created powerful incentives to maintain and expand violence because so many people benefited financially from human suffering. The political systems that used gladiatorial games for social control discovered that spectacular violence was more effective than bread alone for keeping populations compliant. The religious systems that sanctified gladiatorial games provided moral justification for enjoying murder by framing it as divine worship. These systems reinforced each other in ways that made gladiatorial games seem not only acceptable, but necessary for Roman civilization. The violence wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature that served multiple purposes simultaneously, while generating enormous economic, political, social, and cultural benefits for everyone, except the people being killed. The Romans created what might be the most sophisticated and successful civilization in human history up to that point. And they did it by building systematic human suffering into the foundation of their society. Their achievements in law, engineering, military organization, and cultural development all depended on their willingness to treat vast numbers of human beings as disposable resources whose lives had value only as entertainment commodities. Modern societies like to believe we've moved beyond such systematic violence, that we've learned to value human dignity and rights in ways the Romans never did. But the underlying human impulses that created gladiatorial games, the desire for entertainment, the willingness to ignore suffering that doesn't affect us directly, the tendency to dehumanize people who are different from us, the acceptance, though violence when it serves our purposes, haven't disappeared. We still live in a world where systematic violence serves economic and political purposes, where entertainment often depends on human suffering, and where the powerful exploit the powerless through systems that are designed to appear legitimate and necessary. The forms have changed, but many of the underlying dynamics that created gladiatorial games continue to operate in different contexts. The Romans at least were honest about their violence. They didn't pretend that gladiatorial games were anything other than murder for entertainment. They built their killing machines in full public view and celebrated their efficiency. Modern societies often hide their systematic violence behind bureaucracy, technology, and euphemistic language that makes it easier to ignore the human cost of our civilizational achievements. Perhaps the most important lesson from gladiatorial games isn't that the Romans were uniquely cruel, but that ordinary people in any society can learn to accept, ignore, or even celebrate systematic violence when it's properly packaged and justified. The crowds in the Colosseum weren't fundamentally different from crowds in modern stadiums. They were people seeking entertainment who had learned to find it in places we now consider morally unacceptable. The gladiators themselves, whether volunteers, seeking fame and fortune, or condemned criminals fighting for their lives, were trapped in systems that offered them no real choices. They could die quickly or die slowly, die shamefully, or die with honor, but they couldn't choose not to die for someone else's entertainment. Their agency was limited to choosing how they would serve a system designed to destroy them. The economic incentives that created and maintained gladiatorial games remind us that systematic violence often persists not because people are evil, but because it's profitable. When entire industries depend on human suffering, when political systems depend on spectacular violence for legitimacy, when social hierarchies depend on demonstrating the disposability of certain groups, then violence becomes institutionalized in ways that are difficult to challenge or change. Rome eventually fell, as all empires do. The same forces that made Rome great, its appetite for conquest, its willingness to exploit human resources, its dependence on violence for social control, eventually consumed the empire itself. The costs of maintaining systematic violence eventually exceeded its benefits, and Roman civilization collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. But the Colosseum still stands, partially ruined but still magnificent, still drawing millions of visitors who come to admire Roman engineering while carefully not thinking too hard about what that engineering was designed to accomplish. It's a monument to human achievement and human cruelty existing in the same structure, reminding us that civilization's greatest accomplishments often come with moral costs that are easier to ignore than to confront. The next time you see a movie about noble gladiators, brave warriors, or glorious Roman civilization, remember what gladiatorial games actually were: systematic murder designed as mass entertainment by a society that had learned to find human suffering profitable, politically useful, and morally acceptable. Remember that every cheer from the crowd was a celebration of someone's death, that every architectural innovation served the purpose of making killing more spectacular, and that every economic benefit came from treating human beings as disposable, entertainment commodities. The Romans gave us roads, laws, language, and architectural techniques that we still use today, but they also gave us the example of what happens when a society decides that some humans exist solely for the entertainment of others, when systematic violence becomes economically necessary, and when moral progress is sacrificed for political stability and popular entertainment. We can choose to learn from both aspects of Roman legacy, admiring their achievements while understanding their costs, appreciating their innovations while rejecting their values, and building our own civilizations in ways that honor human dignity, rather than treating it as a commodity to be consumed for profit and pleasure. The arena is empty now, the crowd has gone home, and the sand has been raked clean for tomorrow's games. But the choices that created gladiatorial games, the choice to value entertainment over empathy, profit over people, and spectacle over human dignity, remain available to every society in every age. The question isn't whether we're better than the Romans. The question is whether we're willing to recognize the Roman impulses in ourselves and choose differently, knowing that the cost of our choices will be paid by people whose names we'll never know, whose suffering we'll never see, and whose humanity we'll never be forced to acknowledge. Tonight, when you go to sleep in your comfortable bed in your safe home in your peaceful society, remember that your comfort might come at costs you've chosen not to calculate, that your entertainment might depend on suffering you've chosen not to see, and that your civilization might be built on compromises you've chosen not to examine. The gladiators are gone, but the arena remains, waiting for the next society confident enough in its righteousness to believe that its violence is different, its exploitation is necessary, and its cruelty is justified by the greatness it makes possible. Sleep well and dream of empire. But remember, when you wake, that every empire in history has believed itself to be different from all the empires that came before. The Romans, watching people die for their entertainment, were certain that their civilization was the pinnacle of human achievement. History will judge whether they were right. And someday, history will judge whether we are too.